Right now, I'm challenging myself to see if I can make 128 Regulation H teams that are each different from one another over the course of 128 days. Why 128, you might ask? At the end of the 128 days, we're going to do something special where we battle every team against each other in a single elimination bracket to see which team emerges on top. There will be some competitively strong teams, there will be some gimmick teams, and there will be some probably a good number of goofs and gaffs in there, so if you want to follow through to the end, subscribe so that you can keep up with each day. But without further ado, let's move on to day 79. Alright everybody, welcome back to another video, and in today's video we are going to be going over a fake Dozo team. Now this Dozo team is meant to look like we're using Dozo Tatsugiri, however it is actually a fake Tatsugiri as we are using Storm Drain Tatsu instead of Commander. So this team is meant to pretty much just bluff the fact that we are not actually using combined Dozo and Tatsugiri, and maybe force the opponent to try and target down Dozo when Dozo really isn't a core piece on this team. It's more the other pieces that are meant to do all the damage and all the work. But starting off with Dozo, we have Surf so that we can side proc our Storm Drain, but it's also some good special damage as we're not investing too much into Dozo's attack, even though it's kind of maxed out. We don't have like clear emulate or anything to keep our attack from being lowered, and our other two attacks, Heavy Slam and Stomping Tantrum, are nice to have just to try and chip the opponent, but they're definitely not the core damage that we're trying to deal. And then we also have the Yawn slotted onto the Dozo to try and sleep the opponent or make them maneuver in a way around Dozo that maybe puts them more in a position for Tatsugiri to sweep them in the end game. Next up, we have the real star, which is our Tatsugiri, and we're going to be using Choice Specs Tatsugiri as fast as possible to try and hit the opponent. And while Tatsugiri isn't super fast, we do have some speed control on this team, which is mostly just Whimsicott. But for Tatsugiri, we're going to be running our two strong stabs in the Muddy Water and the Dragon Pulse, as well as the Icy Wind just for ice type damage, but also to give ourselves a little bit of speed control, as if we get off the Icy Wind and then we activate our Storm Drain so that the next Icy Wind picks up the KO, the opponent will also be slower, theoretically. And then because this team doesn't have any great ways to deal with opposing grass types, we are going with the Terra Fire, Terra Blast in order to be able to hit grass types. Next up, we got Whimsicott, and this Whimsicott is, of course, a Tailwind setter, and with the Prankster, we'll be getting priority on all of our status moves, which also includes the Encore for hopefully locking the opponent into a poor move that they decide to make, like a Fake Out or something like that into our team. We can lock them into the Encore as long as they're not a Dark type, and since we have a good number of special attackers on the team, which is everyone except for Dozo, we have the Fake Tears in order to make it so that we can double the damage that one of our Pokemon does with their special attacking moves. And since we have a good number of spread moves, it makes sense for us to Fake Tears a Pokemon that probably wouldn't be getting 2-hit KO'd by our spread moves if there's another Pokemon on the field that's getting 2-hit KO'd by the spread move, so that way we can just clear the field at one time. As well as we also have the Moonblast just for a bit of stab damage, but it's also pretty powerful and nice for hitting other dragons. And we are using Covert Cloak so that we're not getting faked out, and we're using Terradark so that we are avoiding opposing Pranksters. Next up, we got Hisuian Zoroark, and Hisuian Zoroark plays a little bit more into the idea that we are bluffing Dozo Tatsugiri, because if we lead Dozo Tatsugiri and they don't combine, the opponent would immediately see through the strategy that Tatsugiri is Storm Drain. However, if we have Zoroark just on the team, then that means that the opponent is more likely to think that one of the Pokemon that we just led is actually Zoroark, and more often than not, they'll probably think that it is Tatsugiri is the one, because that means that we can swap in Tatsugiri for Zoroark and then form the full Dozo mode. But we could actually lead Zoroark as either slot here, really. Probably less so as Tatsugiri, since Dozo's more of a support piece for Tatsugiri. But on the Hisuian Zoroark, we have a full offensive moveset in the Shadow Ball to do our Ghost type damage, and the Hyper Voice to do our spread normal type damage, as well as the Flamethrower is good for hitting those grass types again, and we're Terrifier specifically for hitting grass types again. And we have Protect and Focus Sash just to try and save Zoroark for some turns, so that way it can deal the damage into the opponent that it needs to do. Next up, we got Hisuian Decidueye, who I mostly slotted on because I wanted a special attacking fighting type, and a special attacking fighting type with the ability Scrappy that can hit ghost types is pretty neat. Where we have the Aura Sphere, which is a pretty strong attack that will never miss the opponent, and we also just have that good strong energy ball, as well as we have the Air Slash on Decidueye for hitting opposing grass types, and that's also partially why we are Terra Flying, to maybe dodge some ground type moves, but also flying, it just gives us some nice resistances and boosting up our flying type damage. And we have the Grass Pledge, since we are running a second starter on the team in the Swampert. I thought it made sense to use Grass Pledge and Water Pledge together in order to form the Swamp Field, which would cause the opponent to have their speed drops, which is another form of speed control whenever you create the Swamp Field by using Grass Pledge and Water Pledge at the same time. Also, our Decidueye is a Assault Vest, just so we can try and tank special attacks mostly. And lastly on the team, we have Swampert, who it's kind of hard to have a usage case for Swampert, but I think that this is a decent one since I wanted a water starter, and a lot of the water starters that we could have picked here probably wouldn't fit as well as Swampert does, because Swampert gives us some nice stab damage and the earth power for being able to hit the opponent, and also it makes us less prone to being rolled by electric types. Even though Tatsugiri, Whimsicott, and Decidueye can kind of deal with electric types, it's not super guaranteed, but Swampert being a ground type does make it easier. It also gives us something to hit poison types like Sneasler. But Swampert is going to be super fast with the Choice Scarf, so that we're hopefully outspeeding Tatsugiri, and then we can go for the Side Surf like Dozo does, except Swampert will be able to go for it before Tatsugiri attacks, so that we can get the special attack boost before Tatsugiri attacks. And we also have the Water Pledge, just as our single target damage, to do that thing with Grass Pledge that we mentioned before, where we set up some speed control for ourselves over some turns. And we have the Wide Guard, which isn't a great thing to lock yourself into at the end of the game, but it does save you sometimes whenever there's like an Eruption Torkoal or something like that. It means that if Torkoal wants to go for Eruption in front of you and you just lock in Wide Guard with your Swampert, the opponent has to KO Swampert, and Swampert's like decently bulky. Like, we have a lot of speed investment on here, but Swampert can take at least one or two like neutral hits from like an Indeedee or something like that. As well as also whenever Swampert's health gets too low, we are using the Torrent's ability, which I think is our first time using the generic starter abilities other than Overgrow Meowscarada, but whenever Swampert's health gets too low, we will be gaining a 1.5 times boost on our Surf and our Water Pledge, which is kind of neat. So yeah, that's the basic gist of the team. Let's get into some battles. Alright, so first up we have an opposing Trick Room Sun team, but they also have the Hisuian Zoroark for being a little cheeky with perhaps leading something that's kind of different. They can only really lead it as the Gallade or the Ursaluna or the Exeggutor though. But what's nice is that we have Hisuian Decidueye, who, because of our Scrappy, we can just click Aura Sphere into ever slot we want. And if it launches it into Zoroark, then it'll be super effective, because Zoroark is a normal type. But they start the game with Ursaluna and Exeggutor, which I wasn't exactly expecting. I thought they would start with like a Trick Room mode, which is kind of why we have Decidueye, who might be able to compete with some of the Pokemon inside Trick Room. But they immediately Terra Ghost the Ursaluna as we Tailwind here, seeing as they're probably not setting up the Trick Room with Exeggutor, since they have like Torkoal and Indeedee and stuff, which probably tells me that Exeggutor wants to be fast Exeggutor. But they do go for the Expanding Force with Exeggutor, and they decide to Earthquake with Ursaluna, but that doesn't do too much damage to us because of our two grass types. But it does, Exeggutor is still a grass type, but it still does notable damage into Exeggutor, where we could probably pick it off with the Moonblast. Opponent decides to swap into Indeedee here, and unfortunately the play doesn't go great for us, because I tried to Encore the Ursaluna and then try to start doing some chip into it. But unfortunately, fortunately, Ursaluna does decide to go for the Headlong Rush, but we don't get to just lock it into Earthquake, so it doesn't side attack into Indeedee here, which would have been kind of nice to see. Opponent protects because I figured they want to get Trick Room this turn, so I just start chipping the Indeedee, maybe trying to get a KO on it. Might have been better to Air Slash there, because then we could get the flinch on the Indeedee, which I think would kind of wrap the game, but they get their Trick Room here, as they can only use Ursaluna to hit one Pokemon right now, because of the Earthquake will not deal damage to Decidueye. But we bring in Dozo, who I made to be slower guaranteed than Ursaluna, but it's not going to be slower than Ursaluna in this game right now, as they do Facade into Dozo, but Dozo takes it pretty good. And we just surf the opponent maybe to try and pick off Exeggutor, and we get some Ursaluna damage as Exeggutor goes down. And at least guaranteed this turn, no matter what happens, the Ursaluna is guaranteed to go down due to the burn damage. So Dozo does go down here, but we get to Aura Sphere there, Exeggutor, and Ursaluna does go down to the burn. So now we just have to stall out one turn of Trick Room with Tatsu and Decidueye, and they have Torkoal in the end game, which is great for us because even if they had like Earth Power on Torkoal, they can only lock one move if they are choice specs, which if you're running a team like this, you probably are choice specs. So they side Helping Hand into the Torkoal here, and they go for the Eruption, which Tatsugiri takes it pretty good because of quad resisted, but Decidueye not so much. And we get the Muddy Water into Indeedee and the Muddy Water into Torkoal. And now the Trick Room is over, we can just click the Muddy Water into Torkoal in order to end the game. So we didn't actually get to activate Tatsugiri's Storm Drain there. However, I do think it was very valuable to make the opponent think that we were going to form the full Dozo mode whenever we were inside the Trick Room, as they decided to use Ursaluna's Facade to click into Dozo. And if we had gotten the Tatsugiri in whenever the Ursaluna was on the field, then I think the game would have been definitely pretty cooked. Up next, we got a team with a pretty interesting spread of mons, the most notable one probably being the Gastrodon, because Gastrodon is another Storm Drain mon, which kind of keeps us from going for our Storm Drain strategy. But they also have the Weezing, which will also negate us going for the Storm Drain. And Superior is just a really strong Grass type here. I have the Dondozo Eevee to like kind of deal with at least one hit from the Rillaboom, but not so much from the Superior if it decides to just start throwing out Leaf Storms. So the opponent starts Metagross and Weezing, which is perfectly fine for us as we lead the Dondozo Tatsugiri, and the neutralizing gas activates, which probably makes the opponent think that we were originally Commander, but we don't get off the Commander because of the Weezing's neutralizing gas, as we have Zoroark in right now because its ability would be negated, so it would be revealed. But we just go for that Muddy Water, and it does perfectly good damage into both slots here. Weezing kind of at a 2-ko range because of its berry, but they Ice Punch, and then they Will-O-Wisp into Dozo, but our Stomping Tantrum pushes the Weezing back into 2-hit KO range from Tatsugiri, so we get the Muddy Water off into Weezing there, and because Weezing's ability was still activated, the Metagross gets an accuracy drop, which it wouldn't normally because it's Clear Body, but they Ice Punch into Tatsugiri again, but we get the Surf, and that activates Tatsugiri's Storm Drain. But now Tatsugiri is in range of a Bullet Punch, and they bring Gastrodon back in to perhaps catch a Water type move. They try Bullet Punching Decidueye, but Decidueye dodges it because of the accuracy drop, and we do some Stomping Tantrum chip damage into the Metagross here, and Decidueye is heavily pressuring the Gastrodon with a Grass type move, and they do Bullet Punch Decidueye here, and we Gastrodon protects our Grass type move, but Stomping Tantrum is enough to pick off the Metagross. Now it just depends what Pokemon they have in the back, and it is in fact the Superior, and I figure Superior is going to attack this turn, or Gastrodon's going to do something crazy, and Gastrodon does Terra Poison here in order to avoid being KO'd by Decidueye, but we go for the Terra Flying on Decidueye in order to try and deal some flying type damage into Superior, and we get a pretty good amount as Muddy Water comes out from Gastrodon, and now we bring in quote-unquote Tatsugiri, but it's actually the Zoroark who is able to outspeed the Superior and KO it with the Flamethrower, as Zoroark is revealed because Tatsugiri was previously on like 1% health, and we take out the Gastrodon there at the end with the combined attacks of Zoroark and Decidueye. Lastly, we've got a team here that looks like it wants to be a Gravity team, as they have the Sableye for setting up the Gravity, and they have the Hustle Flapple, as well as the Yanmega, who can go for like Hypnosis and stuff while getting speed boosted. So this game, we start with Swampert and Whimsicott here, just so Swampert can perhaps play the field and hopefully not see Appleton, and the opponent decides not to lead with Appleton, which is great for us. We go for Tailwind with Whimsicott, as the Sableye tries to go for the Quash here, but they went for Tailwind, so I'm really not sure what the point of them going for Quash was, as they do get a speed boost on Yanmega, so even though Swampert's Choice Scarf, it might be faster than Yanmega, but we get to Encore the Whimsicott here, and because the I wasn't afraid of the Sableye taunting into Whimsicott on that turn, because Whimsicott is faster and we both have Tailwind up. But Sableye does in fact go for the Gravity here as we Surf again, and we get both opponents within range of another Surf, and they decide to swap in their Ursaluna here, but we swap in our Tatsugiri in order for Tatsugiri to get the special attack boost, and we deal good damage into the Ursaluna as they bring in Flapple. And we Terra Fire Tatsugiri because I'm not sure how fast the Flapple was going to be. We do have the Tailwind up right now on both sides, so all things considered, the speeds are going to be the same, but because Tatsugiri is so fast, it should be faster than both of these Pokemon. So we get the Surf again from Swampert, and we crit the Ursaluna, but that theoretically shouldn't matter,
Because even if Ursaluna had taken a KO this turn on Tatsugiri with like Blood Moon, Tatsugiri is still going to get to act right after, and we're going to get to KO their Flapple, and Tailwind's peter out here. So if Ursaluna picked up a KO at the end of this turn instead of being crit, we still have either Swampert or Tatsugiri left, who will be faster than the Ursaluna and can pick up the KO next turn, unless they protect or do something with the Mega Tailwind. But then we would be able to bring Whimsicott back to the field to set up our own Tailwind, or maybe try and go for an Encore into the opponent or something like that. So I think that crit really did not matter, even though it kind of looks like it does.
Well, yeah, that's the basic gist of how the team works. It's very dependent on the closed team sheet format. Even though you could use an open team sheet, you're going to be very careful with your plays, since your opponent will pretty much know your entire strategy off the bat and can just protect you out to see whether or not you are Zoroark. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked it, maybe consider leaving a like on the video, and even consider subscribing, because both of those things will help me out an absolute ton. And I will see you in the next one. Thank you.